This week on Hip Hop Now podcast, we're going to talk about unreleased hip hop albums. Get ready.
But let's get right to the business.
Read these headlines. This album must be gone. This album must be gone. This album must be gone.
Classic albums are
Come to Hip Hop Podcast.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast Extra, a podcast designed to catch you up on all things hip hop music and culture. I appreciate everybody who listens to this podcast, whether you're a new listener or returning listener, but it's more important that you share this with people you know enjoy this type of hip hop content, because we chop it up about hip hop here. You can follow me on social media at Vegas World INC. Also, if you Facebook is what you do, right? Facebook.com/hip hop right now. Search for that Hip Hop Right Now on Facebook. That's the official podcast Facebook page. Hit that like button. Not only is the this podcast is there, but also what's going on with my mic situation? Hold up, let me fix this. Not only is the podcast there for you to keep up to date, but I also share other content I find across the internet. So big shout outs to Hip Hop DX, allhiphop.com, Ambrosia for Heads, a bunch of sites that Hip Hop Golden Age, a bunch of sites that, help keep this hip hop thing going. But let's get right into the business, man. Real quick, I just want to let you know, because a lot of people sometimes hit me up, and not everybody has a SoundCloud account. Not all people have iPhones. Not all people have an Android. People have different ways of consuming content, and this podcast in particular. Some people just listen on their computer. Number one, this podcast is safe for work. I guarantee it. Number two is the fact that it's available on everything. So if you got Android, Google Play Music is the app. You can search in podcasts, Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you have an iPhone or an iPad or a Mac or whatever, I am on iTunes. So you can also search for Hip Hop Now Podcast. But let's say you don't want to use those apps. Let's say you like me, because I use a third-party podcast app to listen to the podcasts I enjoy. I'm available on a couple of things, from Stitcher Radio to Spreaker to TuneIn. What else am I? Podbean, and probably a couple of other places that I did not post my joint, but people, show love and post your podcast and other places. So it's pretty dope. So there's no excuse. Oh, but of course, the hub being SoundCloud is another place where you can check out, and that's where the podcasts are posted every week. SoundCloud.com/hip hop right now. Sometimes you got to say that because people enjoy the podcast, they enjoy the content, and they keep it moving. But they don't realize that subscribing is very easy, because then you don't really have to remember or see one of my posts on social media to say, oh, yeah, let me check that out. You get it anyway. You know what I'm saying? It's coming directly to your device anyway through subscribing. Hitting that like button tells me you enjoy this podcast and that I should keep it going, because trust me, I don't get paid a dime to do this. I don't have any sponsors. I'm looking into that. I don't have any advertisers, anything of that nature. So it's your support that keeps this podcast going. All right. So recently, in 2017, I've been on this thing where I've been looking back, right, at a couple of albums, not my favorite albums or classics or whatever, but albums that I feel like a lot of people enjoy and are real nostalgic for, especially in the 90s. And I always think to myself, I never heard that album in its entirety. Like when I mentioned Diggable Planets. Like, I wasn't a big fan of Diggable Planets. I liked the Rebirth of Slick, and that was just about it. But I never heard the album. So I always felt like, well, a lot of people like this group a lot. They swear by those albums. Maybe I should check them out. I did the same thing real recently with Farside. I was a huge fan of the single Passing Me By. I even bought the single. I still have the single on cassette in my garage. Maybe I'll post that on Instagram. Um, but that was kind of it. And granted, full disclaimer, full disclosure, I was younger back then. I didn't really have no job, and a little bit of money I did get, if I had $10, right? Let's say I had 10. Let's say I was rich and I had $20, right? Um, I was gonna buy something I wanted. So if there was something that I wanted and it was coming out, there was no time to experiment with that $10. That $10 was going to Ice Cube or Poor Righteous Teachers or whoever album I was looking forward to. But there were times where I would go in the record store and I could experiment, but I never really wanted to pick up Far Side or whatever because I felt like I had heard other songs briefly and was kind of like, But I say all that to say this. I felt like, okay, I'm going back, but I've been going back in time in another way. And we're talking about unreleased hip hop albums. Albums that were going to come out or that were bootlegged or came out years later or whatever the case may be that were unreleased and thinking about what it would have been like if they would have dropped at that time. I say that because recently Rod Digger put out an album that was shelved. I believe it was supposed to drop in like the 2000s or something like that. I have it here somewhere. I think it was supposed to drop like in the early 2000s. The name of the album is Everything Is a Story, right? I remember the album cover. I remember the fact that it was coming out. This album had production from everybody you could think of. Everybody that was hot, there was production. Dilla, everybody, right? But it got shelved for whatever reason and never came out until 2017, which is crazy. I have it. I heard it. It's dope. Don't worry about it. Rod Digger's dope. But then, big shout out to the homie Kill. Follow him on Twitter at Kill889. I was on his podcast, and we did this one particular podcast, and we were talking about Large Professor. And I remember this, but it was something I forgot. And he held up the CD, and he was like, yeah, and if this album would have ever came out when it was supposed to back in 95, 96, we'll be talking about Large Professor in a different light. So that piqued my interest because I'm like, I remember that they finally put out the album from Large Professor's first solo album that never came out until a couple of years ago, called the LP. And I was like, you know what? I never heard that joint, but I never really wanted to go back because one thing about albums that I never heard, whether they were unreleased or something like the Far Side album, I have to get in a certain mind frame to listen to old stuff for the first time because I'm not in that mind frame right now. You know what I'm saying? 2017. So I have to think, when was this supposed to come out? Okay, so I know what the sound is like. And then I can hit play. So I know what to expect. So I'm not sitting here like, your sound mad old. It's like, yo, fam, it is old. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I listened to the Large Professor album, the LP, and I was like, yo, this joint is dope, man. The beats are dope. I recognize a lot of the beats, a couple of the songs. Of course, I recognize like Mad Scientist and 1+1 featuring Nas, just hearing them joints back in the day, but separately from the album. And even another group with like I, Pete Rock's group that never came out. Kill again hit me off with the CD or the MP3. Well, I'm showing my age, but yeah, the MP3. And I listened to that joint, and I was like, man, if this would have came out 96, 97, wherever it was supposed to come out, I'm like, man, this would have been dope. So I said all of that to say this, right? There are a lot of albums, unreleased albums that were changed because they were bootlegged, that were supposed to drop, that are really good. There's some things that get shelved because they're trash and they never see the light of day. Or when you hear them, you can understand why it never came out. But then there's some joints where it's like, man, this label was sitting on a gem that regardless of the time or the window or whatever, it should have came out. Now, I get it. Sometimes they sit on albums because one day that artist will pass on into the essence. And you can say, bam, unreleased album that Michael Jackson worked on at the height of his career. A person like me who's a Michael Jackson fan, I'm buying it. I don't want to hear no records, nothing. Just give it to me. Because so I could see that being the case with some of these albums. But it's 2017. We have the internet, and it's, trust me, you can get whatever you want. Trust me. What T.I. said, you can have whatever you like or whatever that record was. Um, and real quick, also, I used to have this other segment, excuse me, that I used to do on the show Strictly Hip Hop and B-More. Shout out to WEAA. Um, and I did this segment called One to Flow On, which I eventually turned into a podcast before this podcast. And this podcast is basically that, just, a little bit more developed. But I did this thing called, or this podcast called Would Be Classics. And it was albums that were either bootlegged or shelved that, if released upon the time it was supposed to come out, they might have been considered classics amongst hip hop fans. And those albums were the original Supreme Clientele, not the one that came out where you bought a CD, I bought a CD, and the track listing was different. And it was missing certain records and it was just all jacked up. And there's a theme here also. Also included 50 Cent's Power of the Dollar, the album that he was shelved after he got shot, and then he had to do the G Unit mixtapes and, Get Rich or Die Trying. You know the end of the story. You know how it go. But even that album. And then there was Nas's double album that was supposed to drop after it was written, that a lot of the songs wound up going through the album I Am, and a couple on Nostradamus, and even more on what's the Lost Tapes that everybody loves and considers a classic, which is crazy. But think about, and we're gonna start right there with that one. Let's just start with that album, right? I Am Nostradamus, heavily bootlegged. The whole album. Everybody had the whole album. I was at Morgan State in Baltimore. I had the whole album. Bought the bootleg in NY. Sorry, Nas. I'm saying, though, it was fire. I had to have it. And it was exclusive. But bought the bootleg. It was the whole album, double album. And when I tell you that that is a situation, that is a prime example of something happening and changing the course of hip hop as it relates to certain artists. You know what I'm saying? And think about it. If this album would have, like, everybody, okay, Illmatic is the holy grail, right? Not everybody likes It Was Written, but it generally people like it. I liked it. Nothing wrong with It Was Written at all. Don't listen to Jay-Z. It wasn't, everybody liked it. They was listening to that and Reasonable Doubt in 96. Don't sleep. But then I Am Nostradamus was supposed to be out, or I Am the Autobiography, whatever it was supposed to be called. But it was supposed to be a double album from Nas before Life After Death and not before All Eyes on Me. But this album had Drunk by Myself, Amongst Kings, Fetus, Take what's the joint? Let's just say Take a 50. Whatever it's called. You know what I'm talking about. Blazer 50. There we go. That's it. Project Window. Like it just had so many dope records on it. It was the perfect, like how some people didn't really like the whole Trackmasters thing where It Was Written, so they didn't really like it because of Illmatic. I Am Nostradamus, or I Am the Autobiography, was literally Illmatic blended with It Was Written and the bar was raised lyrically, beat wise, conceptually, and everything. And it's terrible that that joint never came out, or came out in pieces. So you will never see, unless they choose to just do that, but it doesn't make sense. You will never see that album get released as it was supposed to be, which kind of sucks. But if you're a hip hop fan like me, you already put one together. You know what I'm saying? So I have it. I have it on my phone. I have it on my computer and everything. This album in particular. I mentioned the Rod Digger joint, and I hope you're writing these down because, yes, you can find them on the internet. The Rod Digger joint, Everything's a Story, producers on there like Just Blaze, Dilla, a bunch of people. It's crazy. It's on her Bandcamp page. I believe it might also be on SoundCloud, but check for that. 50 cents, Power of the Dollar, like I mentioned, which was pretty dope because like now I'm looking at this site in particular and they list Thug Love like it's some big deal, but joint had How to Rob, Life's on the Line, Ghetto Quran, the Bodega joint or whatever that was called. It was pretty dope. Now Get Rich or Die Trying was kind of like it was. I guess you could look at Power of the Dollar was more like, the more hood version, of Get Rich or Die Trying. Yeah, like more the quality of the beats, the way it was centered. Yeah, he still had a lot of top notch production, but Get Rich or Die Trying was kind of like a huge upgrade because Dre with the sound quality is crazy. But yeah, man, that album was dope. Power of a Dollar, 50 Cent. You could find it anywhere. I think it's a classic. Well, it's a classic for me. Really like that album. It's really dope. What's the other one I mentioned? Large Professor, the LP. That's official, so you can find that one. And I give it a thumbs up, especially thinking about when it was supposed to drop. And if it was supposed to come out in about 95, 96, because remember, Large Professor said it on the Tribe Called Quest album, Midnight Marauders album. He was like, buy the album when I drop it. And that verse was so dope from him, we was ready, but it never dropped. I think it took mad years to drop because it came out in like 2009 or something like that. But the LP is available. Now I want to get into a couple of other ones that I haven't heard them in their entirety, but I have heard enough from them as far as songs that's on there. How about the album that Old Dirty Bastard was working on before he passed away, when he was signed to Rockefeller? How about that? You know what I'm saying? And I believe this was what, 2005? No, maybe this is something else. I'm mixing a couple of things up. But it was called A Son Unique. It was supposed to be his third album, his Rockefeller debut. But you know what happened on Rockefeller, and things led to another, and it got kind of crazy. But there was some heat on here. There was some definite heat on here. Son Unique. What else was on here? Raekwon was on here. Meth. Macy Gray. MOP. Pop Shots. It was really some dope stuff. Now here's one joint, and again, big shout out to Hip Hop Golden Age because I'm checking out some of these from their page. Joe Budden had an album called The Growth that was supposed to drop, I believe, when he was on Def Jam. Now a lot of what's here wound up becoming some of the original tracks you would hear on what to me is a classic mixtape series in Joe Budden's mood music mixtape series, like the song Dumb Out was on there. But songs leaked, and you know how that go. So there's like Outkast and Sirius and just a lot of dope joints. Not Outkast the group. These are songs from Joe Budden. Mood music too though. That's a dope one. That's the gem. And a lot of them joints appeared on there, like Dumb Out. I didn't really know about that album, but it does make sense because it seems like when Joe Budden debuted on Def Jam, he had the one album, he had the one hit, and then there was a minute where you didn't see anything from him for a while, and now we know why. They have up here Ali Vegas, Generation Gap, which I thought was dope. I liked Ali Vegas. I never really got the. There was one song where I thought he sounded like Nas, but it never was that much of a big deal. And I also, I interviewed Ali Vegas back in the days when I used to host the Strictly Hip Hop show. He was a cool dude. Came through with DJ Absolute, if you know your mixtapes and things of that nature. But let me see. It says that Generation Gap was later released as a mixtape. So I didn't know that. I will get my hands on this and check it out. Generation Gap, Ali Vegas. Now, this is something that I had back in the days, but I don't have anymore. Mobb Deep's Murder Music, the original version. There were a couple of songs that didn't make the album with a couple of guest appearances that didn't make the album, like Onyx, and a couple of beats that didn't make the album. Now, I think Murder Music is the other classic that Mobb Deep has. There's the Infamous and there's Murder Music. So I like what was released, but when you look at what was supposed to be out, like Perfect Plot, Nobody Likes Me, it's kind of like Raekwon was on a couple. Trust me. I mean, it's getting to the point now where I'm about to go and find it. You know what I'm saying? But write these joints down. They are available, fam. I'm looking at them. Trust me. When I get off of here, I'm getting back into it. Y'all remember the dude, the Last Emperor or Last Emperor? He had an album called Legend of Bigfoot. Dude was from Philly, which never came out. But album had production from the Beat Miners, Diamond. That's Diamond D for some of y'all. Prince Paul, DJ Muggs. Yeah, man. Nice lineup. And let me see what this says. Something fresh, conceptual, lyrical, and overall super talented album is an absolute must. So, again, this was supposed to be on Raucous, but it shut down. He became an indie artist. And let me see, releasing his debut retail album, Music, Magic, Myth, to critical acclaim. Okay, so that's something else. But the thing is this album is also available. On YouTube, you can listen to the whole thing. So, The Last Emperor, The Legend of Bigfoot. I'm going to have a really hip-hop style weekend because I'm about to listen to all these joints. Young Z, Musical Meltdown. Young Z from back in the day, the Outsiders crew, had a little buzz back then, closely tied to Rod Digger, if you know what I mean. And and Eminem from back in the days. And he had an album that also never came out, which is crazy. Had production from Ski Beats and KRS-One. So check for that joint. Lord Have Mercy. Y'all remember him from Flip Mode Squad? He had an album with a cover and all that called The Ungodly Hour. He had what we call in radio a voice of God. When you kind of got that voice, like when you go to movie theaters and they be like coming to theaters and Tuesday or whatever the hell. That was terrible. But you know what I'm talking about, right? I can't believe that this never came out. And he had a record that I totally forgot about with M.O.P. called Home Sweet Home. But according to Hip Hop Golden Age, because I really don't have no info on this, the album was never finished. And it only had 8 tracks that were done and mastered. That is crazy. And he also had production from Knots, DJ Scratch, and Havoc behind the boards. That is disappointing. Right? I'm talking to hip hop fans. That's all it's here, right? That's really disappointing because that's something that could have been crazy, even though I wasn't that big of a fan of his. They have on here Flip Mode Squad, the Rulership Movement. I wasn't too excited for that. That was Flip Mode Squad's compilation album. Flip Mode Squad being Busta Rhymes, Rod Digger, Rampage. What's the boy, the little boy dude? He's probably writing everybody's stuff. Um, Baby Sham or something like that. Wait, nah, that's a reggae dude. I don't remember. Uh, but and also Lord Have Mercy, and there were records that were produced or they had production from Knots, DJ Scratch, the Beat Miners, Havoc. Crazy. So, but someone leaked the whole album, so if you're looking for it, it is available. Q-Tip. Remember for the longest time we were waiting for a Q-Tip solo album to drop, and it felt like it never did. Well, Q-Tip had an album that was supposed to drop before Amplified, I believe. Oh, no, after Amplified, which I did not like, because Amplified was Q-Tip's solo album that did drop, right? I'm losing track. But people wanted Tribe Called Quest style Q-Tip just on a solo tip, right? So his original follow-up to not the album he released years later called The Renaissance, but his follow-up to Amplify was supposed to be a joint called Open. It was supposed to drop in 2004. But he had, ongoing beefs with his label and Arista. And at the time, this album, along with the other album, Kamal the Abstract, which I kind of liked, which was like a jazz type joint, were shelved because of these beefs. But guest appearances would have been Common, D'Angelo, Andre 3000. This is a damn shame because Q-Tip as a solo artist was going to happen. Sure, Amplified wasn't what we wanted, but he had hits. You know what I'm saying? Breathe and Stop and all that. People liked it. A couple of more before we get out of here. Razkaz, Van Gogh. This album, you can get it. I believe it's everywhere. It's a follow-up to Racination. I feel stupid saying that, but that's the name of it, so whatever. Featured production from Battle Cat, DJ, what is this, Call? DJ Call. And of course, it was probably a lot of dope records on here, but it never came out. And I always thought that album cover was dope because it was like a Van Gogh, you know what I'm saying? Razkaz is also on here for another album called Golden Child. I remember that joint because it had the Primo track called Golden Child. I'm afraid to hit play. I'm not hitting play. Forget it. I'm not hitting play. But this album, which is another one I think I'm going to have to go and find, had production from Dr. Dre, High Tech. Come on, man. That's just two right there. It featured Busta Rhymes on some tracks, Pharoah Monch. Never came out. And again, it had, production from DJ Premier. Hitman, y'all remember him. He was on Dr. Dre's 2001. He had an album that was supposed to come out called Murder Weapon. Never happened. Had a single featuring, remember the dude Nocturnal? Damn shame. Another Dre dude who album didn't drop when it was supposed to, Bishop Lamont, called The Reformation. Crazy. High Tech, Exhibits featured on there. Just ridiculous that these albums didn't come out. I'm getting upset scrolling through here. And absolutely number one, the album that, man, it, even to this day, even though we got something that just boils my blood to, I don't even know what that means. It just makes me angry, fam. Dr. Dre's Detox. There are songs scattered around the internet, like I Need a Doctor, featuring Eminem and Skylar Grey. Just Under Pressure, Topless, featuring Nas. It's a song I believe I heard with Game, and there's another one I believe with Kendrick. Dr. Dre will not release this album. Somebody else will have to. Detox is real. Unfortunately, it will never come out because Dre is just a perfectionist, and if he ain't feeling it, it ain't happening. I hope you wrote down a lot of those because a lot of that stuff I mentioned is available, whether it's the entire album or whether it's songs from those albums. As a hip-hop fan, if you're a hardcore hip-hop fan like me, you are taking notes or you already got all of them. But I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to go and get some of these right now. That's going to do it for me for this week. You can follow me on social media at Vegas World INC. And if you like Facebook, facebook.com/hip hop right now. Hit that like button. This podcast, again, is available on all your mobile devices, also your computer, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, many more, and of course, soundcloud.com/hip hop now podcast. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace. Drop it on the random.